The Voice of the Cape.
Education Indaba on the Voice of the Cape.
91.3 FM stereo.
Welcome back, and if you have just joined us, well, it's only Yaasierah and myself in studio this evening on Education Indaba. And just a reminder, we said if you want to participate in the program, you can do so by sending us your question or comment via the SMS line, which is 47913, and our WhatsApp number 072-238-0712. And a very big shukran to teacher Fatima Abdurauf for her message, which she sent through early on. Now, I believe we have our guest online. But before I greet my guest online, an SMS which came through from 2839 says, Assalamu alaikum. I would like to know, why can't one teacher go to a class that he or she teaches? Why must 40 children move from one class to another? That is the time when they bunk classes. Please explain. Shukran. Well, we acknowledge that particular SMS, and that's a system employed at different schools. Yaasierah, I know, particularly at primary school, you stay in your class and the teacher will go from one class to another because they do subject teaching.
Yeah.
At high school, it somehow changes, for example, because your Afrikaans teacher is in that particular class, and so your grade 7s come, and then your grade 8s will come, then grade 9. So it's different grades that comes to that particular teacher for that particular lesson. So, Yaasierah, quick comment from your side.
Yeah, you are correct, Riedwaan. Also, I haven't been at a high school for a very long time, but I'm assuming that, you know, the system will still run the same. But if, let's say, room 210 is your classroom where Afrikaans takes place, then standard 6 would come, and then it would follow by standard 7s, etc., and so on. So instead of the educator moving, probably all the resources are also there, etc., and so on. Each class would then go for that specific period.
I think it's more around the resources, Yaasierah, because if you think that one teacher, obviously it's easy to move one teacher from one class to another.
Correct.
But where, for example, you have the resources, you can't now move your resources, from one class to another. But shukran for that particular question. Maybe it's something that we could further debate here on Education Indaba. But moving on to the next segment of Education Indaba, we're saying we're going to be chatting creative conversations. Now, we are joined online by Miss Hanrie Hill, who is the Managing Director for Proactive Communications. Hanrie, a very good evening to you.
Hello, and good evening to you as well, Voice of Cape Town.
Okay, and thanks for your time, particularly on a Sunday evening, to share with our listeners more about creative conversations. Now, I know this comes from Symphonia, but the thing that caught my eye was the saying by Albert Einstein, and it says, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. So where do you think we should start this discussion?
Yes. So I changed conflict to creative conversations because I believe that we actually learn from conflict. We obviously press each other's buttons, and if we can turn it into something positive, we can learn from something, and it can just go better.
So obviously you're saying that most people try and avoid, for example, difficult conversations. We all hate conflict. We really, to an extent, we are also scared, and we want to avoid discomfort.
Yes, I think we put our boundaries down, and then when somebody is crossing our boundaries, obviously it's going to affect our ego states. And then we're going to have either an attack or we're going to run the other way. So what we're saying is if we can turn this into something positive where we have a conversation and we agree to disagree and we listen to each other and the egos don't get in the way. That is creative conversation.
Yaasierah, maybe just a quick question or comment from your side.
Shukran, Riedwaan. Hanrie, I find this quite interesting, and I think earlier before we had you online, I was saying, what is it about conflict that scares us? We defer it, we reject it to a certain extent, and have this pretense that it doesn't exist. And the golden coin in these situations is we just completely avoid it and try and run away from it. So what is it instinctively in humans that conflict is seen as a bad thing all the time? And what role does emotional intelligence play when we're looking at resolving conflict?
You ask me very interesting questions, and I think especially with emotional intelligence, I believe it goes back to your self-esteem. How high is your self-esteem? So if your self-esteem is high, you don't need to react, you don't need to defend yourself when somebody presses your button. Because you can listen, you can be neutral, and you're gonna respond, and you can actually have empathy for the other person's situation. But if your self-esteem is low, people will press your buttons and you will immediately either defend or you will attack. Because you feel that this person is crossing your boundaries
Right.
and you need to protect yourself. And that is when hell breaks loose. And then there's a lot of conflict.
Okay. Just my attention very quickly to the SMS line. There's an SMS here from 6945. It says, Assalamu alaikum Riedwaan. What the dickens is next on the list? Well, I don't understand.
I think it's in response to the amendment bill, Riedwaan. If we're looking at bringing this kind of things back into education, what can we expect next to be?
Okay, shukran. That's why we have Yaasierah in the studio. So as we said to our listeners, do stay tuned. We're going to try and get a debate going around the proposed amendments to the Provincial Education Act. But for now, we are joined online by Ms. Hanrie Hill, who is the Managing Director for Proactive Communications. And this evening we're chatting really about the issue, how does one deal with conflict? And, there's a session happening, Hanrie, I believe in Cape Town on the 1st of November.
It's on the 1st of November. Symphonia is organizing it. It's at the Riedwaan Hills, and it's from 9 to 11. And it's really a taster on creative conversations. So what we'll be exploring on that morning is what is conflict and why do people press each other's buttons? What is it about motivation and behavior? And what can we do? What tools can we use to help us overcome that?
And who
excuse me?
No, I want to know who would be your target audience, Hanrie?
It actually could be anyone who's ever experienced conflict, and I think that's about everybody.
Obviously, we would, because we're running Education Indaba, we would really want to then encourage maybe even our educators out there and even our principals. Because sometimes on a staff, you do have either conflict between colleagues or maybe even conflict, with some of your learners, but it's also a broader spectrum than that.
Yes. When people cross our boundaries, when people press our buttons, then we react, and it could be in any situation. And we probably have learned how to handle conflict at a very early stage in our lives. So those patterns are set, and then to try and change it, it's really, really challenging. So you need a set of tools just to make it easier for yourself.
Because I see that the 2-hour introductory session will focus on the following. It says, what is conflict and when does it occur? Then, when does codependency become conflict? How to recognize it when people press your buttons, and the tools to handle conflict creatively and constructively. I think to me that would be a very important one, Yaasierah. How does the tools, what do you use to creatively and constructively then deal with conflict? Because, we all find conflict within even our lives, within our working environment, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you are correct, Riedwaan. And I think we become so anxious and these situations are so anxiety-provoking, Hanrie, that, we kind of preempt when it's going to happen. And then we kind of put in, a building block where we want to diffuse the situation before it does happen. And that seems to be problematically psychologically, Hanrie, for me, and as a medical professional. At that point, at that stage, what does it say about ourselves as human beings and this preemptive idea that, we can get away from it and not address it as something that would then creatively or constructively influence our life and decisions?
What probably happens is you tap into your history of how you've dealt with people beforehand. And they say history repeats itself. So you start using the same pattern. And then the memory takes over, and then it's either fight or flight.
Yes.
So if you can learn to become aware of it, I think in a 2-hour introductory session, it really is about creating awareness of why do I do what I do, and when do I do it, and how can I be aware of it, and maybe a tool, maybe a technique or something to stop that, to press the pause button and actually watch your reaction and why it happens, and then change it. And that's when the codependency comes in, because codependency is when somebody has power over you and you try and change their behavior.
Yeah.
And if you think of that definition, we actually codependent on most people.
We are.
So you see the lens, you see the world through your own lens. And then if there are different lenses, you might not recognize that it's just a different lens. You see it as somebody is now confronting you, and you need to react.
But Hanrie, I don't want to say how real is this, but sometimes when we listen to these kind of things, and probably myself included, I just think to myself, look, is this probably another workshop where people is going to be telling me this and the other? But when one finds yourself in a real and actual conflict situation, then the situation is somewhat different to reality in terms of what we normally have in almost like a paper exercise.
You know what? You can read so many books. You're absolutely right. You can read so many books about conflict, about emotional intelligence, about understanding yourself. But if you are not going to use it, you're going to lose it. So what we do, especially in a workshop, is one of the tools that we use is the Enneagram. I don't know if you're aware of what the Enneagram is all about.
No.
It's a very old personality tool, and basically, especially in conflict, we use it to talk about people's behaviors and motivation. So there would be 9 different motivations why people do the same behavior. Example, if I pass you a glass of water, the behavior is the same, but there could be 9 different motivations why I'm passing you the glass of water. And that's going to actually it's going to show your shadow side as well, your blind spot, that you're not even aware of. And I find when people start becoming aware of what are their blind spots, what is actually the motivation for doing anything, it helps them with conflict and understanding why people press their buttons. And that's half the battle won.
Mm-hmm. And this course obviously is, presented by Symphonia, and it's called Creative Conversations. Now, this segment of the presentation will be presented by Ms. Hanrie Hill, who is the Managing Director for Proactive Communications. Now, this workshop takes place on the 1st of November 2016 in Cape Town at the Durbanville Hills. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. If you're interested to attend, for more information, you may contact Jolene. This is via email, Jolene, Jolene, Jolene at symphonia.net. So, and we're saying all our educators, or even anybody out there that would want to learn to know about, what is conflict, when does it occur, when does codependency become conflict, and how to recognize when people press your buttons. Well, I know sometimes I think all the time people are pressing my buttons. Yaasierah?
Maybe you're the button, Riedwaan.
Okay. Just my attention very quickly then on Yaasierah's note to the SMS line. There's an SMS here from 2988 that says, Assalamu alaikum, Riedwaan and Yaasierah. I know shout-outs don't happen on this show, but from myself, the rest of the grade 11 accounting class, we want to say a huge shukran to our phenomenal teacher who goes beyond normal teaching, and that is Mrs. S. Adams. We salute you. Well, to that particular listener, shukran jazilan. I've made an exception, yes. We don't know which school it is, and if you want to give your name, you can send me those details via the WhatsApp line once again. Another SMS here from 6501. It just says salam. So to that particular listener, we say wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Now, we still have online Hanrie Antoinette. How would you want to encourage, our listeners to attend this particular workshop on creative conversations?
I think it's just a teaser. It's just understanding, just maybe coming to listen for 2 hours, and it's a self-awareness exercise. In 2 hours, you're not going to have all the tools, but what it may do is make you realize what is actually pressing your buttons and why, and how can you start breaking those patterns and habits and stop reacting and start actually thinking about your reaction and changing your behavior. So instead of doing a cha-cha dance, start tangoing.
Yaasierah, quick comment from your side.
Shukran, Riedwaan. Now, Hanrie, I know there are other things happening at Symphonia and so on. And so I'm more, interested in, if we're looking at the workshop, it is a 2-hour workshop. Is there any kind of, I wouldn't say role play, but kind of interactive a session where, an actual example would be then played out, and people could, with the Enneagram test, the personality tool, look at what triggers are? Does that form part of the workshop?
Yes, because I find that if you go and sit and listen for 2 hours, how much are you really going to retain afterwards? So I find when people do practical exercises, they walk away with a practical tool that they can use. So it will be very practical and very interactive.
Okay, just my attention once again to the SMS line. Doesn't latch onto our topic of creative discussions, but it's a follow-on from our earlier discussion. It says, honestly, did these people not learn from the apartheid and wanting to dominate, throwing morals, values and everything the nation has fought for down the drain? Fees must fall, educators not being protected, etc. You know what? They will never learn. Now, well, that is again in terms of, our previous discussion and article. Maybe we can, after the break, just go back into the particular discussion. But for now, we're chatting with Hanrie, and she is presenting, or she is the facilitator for a session on creative conversations via Symphonia. This will take place in Cape Town on the 1st of November 2016, and it will be at the Durbanville Hills. Now, the program starts at 9 o'clock in the morning, and if you're wanting to make a booking, you can do so via email. You can send your email to Jolene, that is JOHLEEN @symphonia.net. Hanrie, anything in conclusion that you want to say?
No, I'm just really looking forward to the workshops, and thank you so much for the opportunity. It was wonderful chatting to you both.
Well, no, thank you, and particularly for taking out your time. So thanks very much, and everything of the best with the workshop. Yaasierah, maybe any quick comment from your side?
Shukran, Riedwaan. Hanrie, I actually look forward to possibly attending the workshop. I think it's very great. I think that, we have all these ideas around conflict, and, I can almost promise you the moment you mention it anywhere, the immediate reaction is it's a bad thing. I must have done something wrong, or there must be something wrong with the situation, and that's how it stays. So exposing, and specifically anybody who deals with this kind of thing, and Riedwaan would be one of them, confronted with this on a daily basis because of work circumstances, the insight gained, I think, can only be valuable, Hanrie.
Wonderful.
Well, Hanrie, thanks very much for your time, and on that note, everything of the best, and we bid you a very good evening.
Thank you. Thanks so much.